Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Nonsense, the show where we peel back Hollywood's curtain, sometimes to fact check the impossible, and sometimes just to bask in the movie magic.
You know us from our science meets cinema deep dives, Ghostbusters gear, Robocop tech, even everlasting gobstoppers.
But today, it's time to go real deep, where we set aside the science and just dig into the heart of the film. You know, story, characters, themes, and those moments that stick with you.
So dim the lights, cue the popcorn, and let's dive real deep into Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay, man. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. When was the first time you saw this? How old do you think you were?
Well, so I came to this film late, I think, for most people in life. I'm going to say the first time I saw, so the original version, which Roald Dahl was actually involved with up to a point with the Gene Wilder version.
Mhm.
But I think I was 19 or 20 when I saw this film the first
Wow.
time. Yeah, I know, right? What a weird time in life to come to it.
That's interesting. What did you think of it the first time you saw it? Because for me, the first time I saw it, I was probably 5.
Oh my
My
goodness.
well, I take that back. My parents got a VCR really early in the life of VCRs. I want to say it was like maybe 84. So I would have been 6.
Oh my gosh.
So there you go. Now everybody knows how old I am.
That's right.
Um, but I we would go out and we would rent movies, and there was maybe 3 places in town that would rent movies, and this is in the early days, and they had each place probably had 50 movies, and one of the movies that they had to rent for kids was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And there were a
Right.
couple other Disney movies that were high in the rotation back in those days, but that was one that my parents got for me, and I watched so many times, like so many times when I was a kid, and I adored it. But as an adult seeing it for the first time, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, like I said, it's an unusual time to come to a film like that because most people do see films like that in their childhood. That was another thing for me for E.T. I didn't see E.T. until I was 24. So
Oh
I
wow!
know, right? I'm like, I'm admitting. So I grew up. It's interestingly, my parents. So we'll get back to the my reaction to it as an adult. But my dad in particular has been a cinemaphile, I mean his or a cinephile his whole life. And so, but he was of classic Hollywood, right? That's where he grew up.
Hmm.
So the movies that I was seeing as a kid growing up, I mean, they were starring Greer Garson and Jimmy Stewart and Laurence Olivier. And I was watching things, I was watching movies like Four Daughters. I was watching movies like Pride and Prejudice and Gone with the Wind. And so the because of that, a lot of these films that kids ended up seeing, particularly somewhere in the late 70s through the 80s, I missed all those until I was an adult. So coming to this as a 19, 20-year old, I've always been sort of a dreamer, idealist, etc. So the concept for me was amazing. The whole idea of the golden ticket and this anticipation about finding that key to getting into this magical place. Absolutely loved it. But I was really unfamiliar with the cinematic style of the film for that time, and so that kind of tweaked me a little bit. I love the art direction on it. I think that Inside the Chocolate Factory is just this sort of amazing collection of magnificent production design and art direction. Um, but Willy Wonka, even as an adult, Gene Wilder's portrayal bothered me. I was
Really?
I couldn't trust him, and there was this darkness in him. Yeah, so it was really weird. But I loved Charlie and Grandpa Joe. The only thing I'll say in terms of the film as a stylistically, I was not a fan of the music.
Okay, okay. I loved the songs. Um, I just did. And now here's the other thing about for me, I have a massive sweet tooth. So I can remember summers as a kid when see something that happened a lot back then that doesn't really happen these days is your dad having a whole bunch of change in his pocket, and when he lays down on the couch to watch TV at night, all
Mhm.
that change would slip out and slip into the couch cushions. Nowadays, nobody carries cash, but man, my dad, he always had a pocket full of change. So it almost seemed like during the summer, every morning I could go raid the couch and find at least $1 in quarters and nickels and dimes. And we had a convenience store by my house. So I would beg my mom to walk up there with me, and then we would walk up there and I would buy candy. And I loved nothing more than sitting down and watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory while eating just a ton of candy. Um, it was just really, I don't know, it's really weird. I would love when they went into the chocolate room, which is, for those of you that haven't seen the movie, what are you doing? Why haven't you seen this movie? um, there's a scene after they go into the chocolate factory. The first room they go into is called the chocolate room, where every single thing in that room is eatable, edible. You can eat almost anything. And it's like there are giant jawbreakers that they're trying to break open, and inside the jawbreakers are chocolate. There's trees that have foot and a half tall gummy bears hanging off of them, and like you can even eat the dishes, as they say in the song. There's little buttercups that have like, I don't know what he's drinking, tea, water, and then he eats the plant. And every time I would watch that scene, I would just gorge myself on candy. I don't know why. It was just something that I did, and that's like a big part of my childhood. I remember watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and eating a ton of candy. So let's talk about the actual movie for a second.
Yeah, let's.
Like instead of our reactions to the movie, um, tell me what is the movie? Like a basic plot description, if you can remember it.
Yeah, right. No, because it's also been a while since I've actually seen it, but, essentially what you find out is that there is this world famous candy factory. It's not just chocolate, but candy factory, right?
Mhm.
Owned by this sort of enigmatic figure that everyone knows as Willy Wonka. And the factory at one point was closed to the public, had previously been open, right? What happens though, and we don't know why at the beginning, is this enigmatic figure, Willy Wonka, issues a sort of proclamation. There is a sense of him almost being like this candy monarch. And he issues almost this proclamation stating that there are going to be a certain number of what they call golden tickets hidden in pieces of candy, and and it was Wonka bars specifically, wasn't it? That they put the
Yes.
golden tickets in, yeah, and that the lucky, was it 7? I can't remember now. I think the
5,
lucky
5.
5, the lucky
Yeah.
5 finders of these golden tickets would be given a tour and an entrance into the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. And the tickets go out all over the world because Wonka chocolate bars and everything else are distributed worldwide. And we go through a series of seeing people these um, finding these tickets. And then, of course, once they do, our lead character Charlie doesn't get one. He gets this candy bar and he opens it. His It's the one thing his grandparents and his mom and dad have saved to buy him just in case there might be a golden ticket. He opens it and there's not one in there. So, and then we think that all 5 tickets have been found. Well, he gets a small amount of money, and after all the tickets have been found, or seemingly all the tickets have been found, he goes just because he loves Wonka chocolate bars and he buys one. And as he's opening it, there's just this slight peak of gold foil sticking out. And Charlie opens it and he actually finds the final ticket. So Charlie, along with the other finders of the tickets, they end up being given the grand tour of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory by Willy Wonka himself. And then I don't know that we can even worry about spoiler alerts at this point, can we? I mean, this movie's been out so long.
It's 58 years old or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Yeah.
Um, so through a series of unfortunate events for many of the kids, to reference another children's book, um, the many of the children experiment with the candies in ways that they shouldn't and have been told not to, and because of it, they suffer various consequences. But what we find out, to make a long story short, is that Mr. Wonka is actually looking for an heir to his chocolate empire, and Charlie ends up being the one who, through his golden heart, in a sense, his pure motive, and his, in a sense, his ability to see Wonka for who he is, ends up winning the job. And so, and Willy Wonka, in a sense, also has this almost redemptive moment near the end, because he's kind of gone into a place of in his life of despair, which is one of the reasons why he shut the factory to the public originally. So that's sort of the movie in a nutshell. What are your additions to that synopsis?
Um, so there's a couple of things that I remember that you didn't mention. Was number one, when the fifth ticket was found, it was found by this quote unquote gambler in Paraguay,
Hmm.
and it made huge news the next day, finding out that the ticket was fake. And there was um like there's the Charlie was a newspaper delivery boy, so he could
Right.
see the newspaper before everybody else. And he saw that newspaper that morning, and all these people, it's like, it's almost like Disney World, right? Let's just pretend Disney World exists and it's sitting there in Orlando, but nobody can go into it, right? The whole thing is locked. It looks fantastic, but nobody gets to go in. But still,
Right.
Disney products are coming out, and you don't know who the heck is making all these Disney products. That's to me what I always thought about of this golden ticket thing was like, it's first of all, it's the most brilliant marketing ploy in the world. I'm going to hide
Yes.
five tickets to Disney World in a Disney chocolate bar, and you have to buy it and find it, and then you get like a free week at Disney, right?
Yeah.
That's to me what it's like. And so you would sell out of every chocolate bar in the world. For everybody's like, oh my gosh, I got to get in there and see what this is. And so people are buying them by the truckload, buying them by the case. Hell, there's a scene that it does parody really well. It like parodies a cop show where the cops are in this house and this lady's husband has been kidnapped and they're waiting for the phone call, and the phone call comes in and the cops like, okay, we talked to the kidnappers, and the lady's like, whatever they ask for, I just whatever they want, whatever it is, they can have it. I just want my husband back. And he's like, he wants your case of Wonka bars. And she just
That's
sits there
right.
and she's like, "Hey, lady, did you hear me? It's your husband's life or your case of Wonka bars." And she just sits there for a minute and she's like, how long will they get me to think it over? Like, that's how
One
crazy
of the best
people
parts of the
are.
film. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how crazy people are about these Wonka bars. And so yeah, that's how it happens is Charlie sees the newspaper story that this gambler in Paraguay made up a phony ticket, or he buys the chocolate bar, he wins the ticket, he goes home, and he tells everybody in his family, "Look, I won a golden ticket. Uh, our family is super poor. This is going to change things. We're so poor that a loaf of bread looks like we're having a banquet. You know, like
Right.
Charlie gets paid, he buys a loaf of bread, and like they all celebrate because they don't have to eat just cabbage and water. They can have a loaf of bread."
Which,
And he's like,
fine,
"I gotta
demanding,
go."
but okay.
Yeah, but then he's like, here's the thing that a lot of people have a problem with about this film. There's a scene where he goes, "It says I can take somebody with me, Grandpa. I wish you could go." And Grandpa, who has been bedridden for the last 20 years, and he hasn't gotten out of bed, all of
Right.
a sudden is like, "Oh, a free tour of the chocolate factory. Of course I can get my butt up off this bed and start walking around." You know, every other person in that house had to have been like, "Grandpa Joe, you can move?
You can
You can
move.
dance?
You could
You're
have
like
been
dancing
working this
around the
whole time.
house. Yeah, you could have been working this whole time and helped us. We could have had bread every night, you know?" And it's just like, that's a thing that I never thought about as a kid, but has become like the talking point du jour when somebody talks about this movie, is how Grandpa Joe is just like a lazy uh
Good for
some
nothing.
lazy guy, yeah, that just lays around in bed till it's time to go tour the chocolate factory. um
He was waiting for his golden ticket, wasn't he?
I guess so. And then so they go into the chocolate factory, and there's all kinds of things that happen, as Wonka says himself, little surprises around every corner but nothing dangerous. It says that, and yet
He
it seems
says
like
that.
every single kid all has their life in peril at some point.
Yep, that's right,
Augustus
including Charlie. That's right.
Augustus falls in the chocolate river and almost
Mhm.
drowns and gets sucked up the pipe and
Yeah.
shot over to the fudge room. And then the second one to go is Violet. She eats that piece of gum that
The
turns
piece
her
of
into a
gum, that's right, as she
blueberry.
starts
She
choosing
swells
chewing.
up like a giant blueberry, and they roll her into the juicing room, presumably to stick her in between two large plates of a hydraulic press and push down on her to expel what is she gonna
The
just like
juices, right? Yeah, yeah.
vomit gallons of juice, or is it gonna come out both ends? I don't know, but
Probably. There's a
something
reason why they
horrific
didn't
is gonna
show
happen.
us. That's yeah.
Yeah, something horrific is gonna happen to this girl. And then you've got then they go into the room where the geese lay the golden eggs,
Mhm.
and they have a thing called an egg, which when the egg falls down onto the scale, it somehow reads whether it's a good egg or a bad egg, and if it's a good egg, it rolls out and they ship it out. If it's a bad egg, it goes down the chute into the furnace. And she's singing her stupid little song about how she wants everything in the world right
That's
now, and she
right, yes.
stands on the egg, and she's a bad egg, and so she falls down the chute. And
That's
her
right.
dad goes running after her, and he goes down the
And
chute
he goes
too,
diving down the chute too.
presumably to a furnace. So, like,
Yeah,
are they
that's kind of
both
what we
gonna
get
get?
the sense of, isn't it?
Yeah, so either, but Wonka does say, of course, that furnace may only be lit every other day. So, of course, there's a
There's a
50-50
50-50
chance
chance. That's right.
that they didn't die. And then you've got Mike TV, who gets
Yeah, good old Mike
sent by
TV.
television, which means he's transmitted from one platform to another platform, and he's super tiny. He's like the size of an action figure because he gets
Yes.
sent through the air and on a TV. And so they have to take him to a taffy pulling machine where presumably they're going to put this little kid in a taffy puller and just like stretch him back out. What is it going to be like strings, you
And,
know,
like, 8 feet
broken
tall.
broken bones. I don't know. So it's horrific when you think about what happens to these
That's
kids.
awful, right.
And there is a scene where Charlie breaks the rules too by drinking the fizzy lifting drinks, which are they fill you with gas, and the gas is so terrifically lifting that it lifts you off the ground like a balloon.
Well, he and
And
grandpa
him and
both.
yeah,
That's
they
the
both
right?
and
Yeah.
they start floating up, and they float up into this, like, I guess it's a smokestack, but at the top there's this, for some
There's a
reason,
there's
a
a fan.
gigantic fan.
That's right.
that why would you put a giant fan in the ceiling of the room where the fizzy lifting drinks happen? I don't know, right?
You
And the
know,
whole
because
right, and Wonka is so mad at him for this. He's like, "You stole fizzy lifting drinks, you bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing." How about Charlie say, "You had a fan running at the top of this thing, and I almost got chopped to bits. I'm gonna sue you." Like, how about that, right? And, like, for some reason, because, "Oh, no, my stainless steel ceiling has to be washed again, you don't get anything." I know all of this was Wonka to test the kids,
right.
right? Obviously. And Charlie gives back the everlasting gobstopper, which, for those of you that saw our last episode, the everlasting gobstopper is the candy that Wonka invented, that you can suck on it and suck on it and suck on it, and it will never get any smaller. He says it's for children with very little pocket money, and he thinks it's going to be the next big thing. And all of the competing candy makers want to get their hands on an everlasting gobstopper so that they can beat him to market. That's kind of the crux of the movie. Like, when Charlie wins his golden ticket and he's running home, he runs into Arthur Slugworth, who
Well, right,
says,
I think that's something we didn't touch
"Yeah,
on yet is the other candy makers' attempts at being able to steal the recipes, yeah.
right." It's just there's a lot going on in this movie, and I'm trying, like, you don't even have to watch the movie after I talk through this because I've pretty much explained the entire thing.
Okay, disclaimer,
Um,
ladies and gentlemen.
yeah,
We're not telling you not to watch the movie. You should watch the movie, actually, you
yeah,
should. It's a cult classic, and you absolutely should watch it, but you are doing a great job at being very
yeah.
detailed
I'm
in
also
your
very,
description.
very much rambling. I think this
You
movie
are.
is one that I have watched more than any other film. Um, there's
Is
so
this one of those
many.
ones where if you are at the time when we did this before streaming, when you were just popping through cable channels or whatever it would be, if this movie was on, regardless of where it was at, would you just stop and just start watching it?
Um, no, because I owned it on VHS and I watched it all the time.
Okay.
I never had to, like, just, and plus I don't think I ever saw it actually broadcast somewhere. I don't, maybe I
Well, there
did.
were, something we could go into, though this is sort of boring and a little bit of inside baseball. There were a lot of issues with the film in terms of rights because of some of the issues between the
Hmm.
producers and Roald Dahl. So that, again, that's neither here nor there really, but that could be one of the reasons why you never you never saw it.
Yeah, maybe. But I used to watch it enough because I had a VHS copy that I wore out. And then I bought it on DVD, and then I bought it on Blu-ray. I have the soundtrack on vinyl. I adore this film. There's so many cool things about the movie,
So
particularly Gene Wilder.
here's the thing. As an adult now, here you
Yeah.
obviously love this film. You've seen it many, many times. Going back to your first viewing of it, what is it
Okay.
about the magic of that experience that has carried through with you till now? Because it obviously has not dissipated. It's not worn off.
No, it really hasn't. I think it might be the juxtaposition of Charlie being so poor
Mhm.
and getting to go to this fantastical place, and at the end, spoiler alert, being the kid that Willy Wonka gives the chocolate factory to.
Right.
Um, which is another odd thing. Willy Wonka says he wants to retire and give the factory to a child so that the kid will keep doing things his way. Because if he gave it to an adult, the adult would want to do things their way.
Right.
Like, too bad, bro. You're retired. Who cares? Retire and go away. Like, if you don't want somebody to ruin your chocolate factory, don't retire. Like, I don't know. That's my opinion on that. But as a kid, it was the juxtaposition of how poor Charlie was to how fantastical this place was. And every single room they went into was a new surprise that awaited Charlie, who was a kid who did nothing but go to school and go to work, and his
Mhm.
mom did laundry for a living to support him and his four deadbeat grandparents that just laid in the bed all day.
Deadbeat grandparents.
I
Here's a
don't know.
hashtag for you.
Yeah, right. Because grandma the 2 grandmas could have knitted socks for a living, you know what I mean? They're laying there in bed, they could have been knitting all day,
They
and one
definitely
of
could have
them
been
does
knitting.
one
Yeah.
of them does knit because she gives him a scarf for his birthday, so
I
there
don't
is
think
that.
she's a knitter for hire, though. I think that she was just doing that for Charlie.
No, but you gotta pull your weight, you gotta do something. So
That was four intensely dead weights in that bed there.
right, and the other thing is a lot of times, I'm gonna be real with you, whenever I would watch this movie as a child, kind of in the middle era of me watching this film, I would turn it on and fast forward to the scene where Charlie finally buys and gets the golden ticket, so I could just go
Mhm.
right into the Wonka scenes. All that uh the first act where we're meeting the other kids and seeing how they got their golden tickets, like that whole part of the movie did not interest me at all. All I wanted to see was the
Interesting.
chocolate factory stuff, and I watched that a bajillion times. But now as an adult, I love the earlier stuff because that's where some of the best comedy is, and
Absolutely. In
the fake
fact,
newscasts, and it's like way ahead of its time for the way that it actually portrays the story.
well, and that's one of the things I think that is unique about the film. If you look at the way that they do sort of the vignettes with each kid that they introduce, before Charlie finds the ticket, those little vignettes are really quite brilliant. The whole thing, Mike TV is one of my favorite of those vignettes. The it him showing just glued to this screen, and all he can do is watch his favorite TV shows and dress up as his favorite characters. When you talk about being before its time, if you think about the idea of now for our kids, we do things like we limit screen time. We try and get them to play outside. Like all the things, right, that are now like
Mhm.
these massive topics with regard to making sure the development of a child is something that's broad as opposed to
Yeah.
being really narrow. It was already touching on a lot a lot of that stuff. Also, there are underlying themes in this movie of the dangers of unregulated capitalism. I mean, you think about that, that's a
Mhm.
huge underlying theme. And I think honestly, I think that one of the reasons, and it's even Roald Dahl even said this, one of the reasons that he didn't particularly care for the film was because they shifted the focus too much to Willy Wonka. Whereas in the book, it's really about Charlie. And you having mentioned that one of the things that grabbed you so much as a kid and even as an adult is this disparity between this fantastical world and this kid who's just dirt poor, is that in the film anyway, they're outlining this sort of necessity to have the right perspective on life, if you think about it.
Mhm.
Um, And I think also something because Dahl's actually credited as the screenwriter for the film, but David Seltzer actually wrote the movie because when Mel Stewart was directing, there was some friction with regard to creative control and also artistic direction. And eventually, because they couldn't come to an agreement, Mel Stewart and Roald Dahl, he brought in David Seltzer to finish it. I'm going to read this here. It's a quote. One of the critics of the film said here, who is it? Wolper, the one of the producers. Uh, Making changes to Dahl's wishes, leaving his original adaptation, in one critic's opinion, scarcely detectable. So apparently, the movie ends up looking nothing like what Dahl reimagined the book as a film. So I also think that's really interesting in terms of the fact that when the movie came out, essentially, just broadly, it was a box office disappointment. But
Mhm.
as it went to DVD and video or video and DVD, it becomes this cult classic, right? And has
Yeah.
not changed. That's the thing. Willy Wonka is still the original film is still a film that kids and families watch. So you wonder about that and go, well, what is it? And I think it's interesting you say that for you it was that disparity between this magical fantastical place, this place you kind of wish and hope for, and then the reality of your own life.
It's almost like, they are life lessons for certain kids. Like, Mike TV is literally watching TV while the news people are there
Are
trying to
there.
interview him about winning the golden ticket, and his first comment is like, "Can't you shut up? I'm busy." And he's
Right.
watching the
That's
TV.
watching a
Like,
television, that's right.
dude, if my kids won something huge like that and the news was there trying to interview him and it was like, "Can't you shut up? I'm busy." I'd be like, "We're shutting this down right now. This kid is not getting the golden ticket. He's getting grounded for a month," you know? So, like, it's almost like a movie about parents that don't give a crap if
Well,
you really
I
think
think that's
about it.
absolutely a theme in it. It
Yeah.
absolutely is. There's this sense of just feeding the machine and whatever they
Yeah.
want, give it to them, and then we see the results. And if we go back to your point about, Charlie living in poverty, he's the only kid who can't just get whatever he wants whenever he wants out of them. And we see that he's also the kid who ends up having, as Wonka discovers, he's also the kid who ends up having the right outlook on keeping the factory what he
Yeah.
wants. And I think that's another thing. If you look at Wonka's character, his despair comes over what he's seeing happen in the world. And the
Mhm.
kids, other than Charlie, the kids are the manifestation of that, right? So when he makes this offer, it's because he's trying to find someone who will remain childlike in leading this thing. Because if it just becomes a business, if it just becomes a machine, it no longer has the thing that so captivated you, which is the magical, fantastical element. And keeping yourself in some way separated from a life that is simply transactional.
You know what I find, ironic about what you just said is, like, Charlie staying childlike or whatever.
Yeah,
Out of all the kids that were there, he's the one that's the most adult-like because he's the one that
absolutely.
has a job. He's the one that has to worry about supporting his family or helping to support his family anyway. Like, it's crazy that, like, he would be the kid that Wonka picks, and I think it's probably because of the fact that he didn't really ever have a childhood. So maybe it's time
Yeah,
to run the chocolate factory like a child and like embrace your childhood for your adult life, which I think is amazing. I really there's so many just little nuanced things about this story that we could talk about forever.
we
But
could.
we've
Yeah,
been talking for about a half an hour, and I
I
think it
know.
might be
I
time
think
to
it's
wrap
maybe
it
time to
up.
go ahead and call it for this show.
Yeah. So
TOD.
yeah. Well, I will say, okay, that wraps our real deep on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I do hope you enjoyed hanging out in the cinematic trenches with us.
Now, look, if you're loving this format, drop us a review, hit subscribe, and share with your fellow movie buffs.
Next time, we'll be back, this time in the lab, pondering whether or not we can actually create a gadget that will let us trap ghosts or fight ghosts, just like in the movie Ghostbusters. So thanks for listening to Deep Nonsense. See
See
you
you
on
on
the
the
next
next
reel.
reel.
Okay. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Nonsense, the show where we peel back Hollywood's curtain, ugh, sometimes to fact check the impossible.
You're
Sorry.
right. What the
Yeah,
heck
no, I
happened,
just
man?
the fact just peel back Hollywood's curtain, that just sounds gross. All right. Let's
You made it gross.
I did make it gross. I'm sorry. All right, here we go. Ugh.